Good morning. This morning we invite Mary Elizabeth Kenel, who began her wisdom journey as a graduate of Our Lady of Wisdom Academy. She entered the novitiate of the Daughters of Wisdom after graduation. She would, like so many of us, begin her studies at St. John's University, where she obtained a Bachelor of Science in Medical Technology. While with the Daughters of Wisdom, Mary Elizabeth worked as a lab technician at Good Samaritan Hospital in West Islip, New York, and later at Maryview Hospital, Portsmouth, Virginia. It was at this point in her journey that she answered a call within a call, in which her calling to religious life ended, but her journey with wisdom began as she led her to embrace a second calling. Mary Elizabeth obtained her PhD in psychology from the Catholic University of America, and from that achievement flowed a number of amazing accomplishments. She worked as a forensic psychologist in the juvenile and adult courts in Washington, D.C., and later in the police and fire clinic in Washington, D.C., counseling first responders. She contributed articles for publication in Human Development, a periodical dedicated to the interface between psychology and religious life. This led to her working relationship between Father James Gill, S.J., and Linda Amadio, and which continued as they opened a program in human sexuality geared toward providing training for priests, religious, and others in parish or formation ministry. During this period, she conducted workshops for various religious communities that incorporated religious themes with psychology. But most of all, Mary Elizabeth has authored a book titled Seasoned with Sage, Savoring Life's Wisdom. In this book, she uses a developmental approach, incorporating insights from the work of Eric and Joan Erickson, as well as other psychologists who address the acquisition of wisdom in later life. So welcome this morning and to this conversation, Mary Elizabeth, and to our further discovering wisdom.
Thank you very much, Anne. You make it sound like a very great career.
It was.
But
it is.
I'd like to begin by quoting that little snippet from the book of Baruch that is the title of today's presentation. The stars shone in their watches and were glad. God called them and they said, "Here we are." They shone with gladness for the one who made them. And this quote is probably familiar to many of you because it found its way into the readings for the Easter Vigil service. And it happened to have been a favorite of mine. I read it often enough. And I always found myself smiling as I read that line, "Here we are." Well, anyway, I always pictured those stars as a group of little kids playing some sort of hide and seek game. And whoever the adult was, they were trying to fool, was pretending not to find them. And then at the end, they jump out and say, "Here we are." So, it was a very fortuitous assignment to get this one. But today, I wanted to look a bit more seriously at some of the dimensions of that statement, "Here we are." What do we mean when we indicate that we are here? And it seems to me that at one level, we're indicating our presence in a particular time frame. We're here on May 3rd, 2025, not in some other day, not some other year, not in the last century, not in a future century for that matter, but here we are in a time of turbulence, a time in which many of the certainties with which we were raised are being challenged, even destroyed, perhaps. Most definitely, we're appreciating the sting of that Chinese blessing or curse, as the case may be. May you be born in interesting times. Well, indeed, we have been. And yet, I am reminded of the old designation for the year before we got into the Common Era. It used to be the Anno Domini, the year of the Lord. And I suspect it might do us good to reflect upon this being truly the year of the Lord, the year of the pilgrimage of hope, and taking a look at some of the time markers that we find in our liturgies. This is the day the Lord has made. Behold, now is the acceptable time. Today you will be with me in paradise. Because the message that Clarissa Pinkola Estes shared with her readers some 20 odd years ago remains true for us today. We were made for these times. But there are some other dimensions too that also need to be considered. Announcing that we are here also denotes presence in a particular space and place. And thanks to Zoom, we now have the gift not only of bilocation, but let's see, we have Kentucky, we have Connecticut, we have Maine, Long Island, and Washington, D.C. So as you can see, we are sharing space all over the country. And we've got to expand our sense of time and space today, too, because we must learn to include our planet Earth and our place in the cosmos, not just our own little space. And while we experience each of those places, spaces very differently, they are all home at one level. And perhaps now, as the late Pope Francis reminded us on many occasions, we are called to care for our common home, perhaps more than ever, because as we look around us, the Environmental Protection Agency has been gutted, and they are co-opted for the sake of big oil. They're permitting clear cutting of timber in our old growth forests, rollbacks of regulations that protected air and water, and are now exposing everyone, that's plants, fish, animal life, and our human lives, pollutants of all sorts. So clearly, there is a time here where we need to take better care of our common home. And while this could be a rather disheartening view, there is strength and a gift of hope to be found in remembering that our small I am becomes much more powerful as we realize the strength that comes from the fact that we are. I was reminded of Paul Tillich's book, Courage to Be, which was written in the years following World War II. Tillich was inspired to address the concept of courage as he viewed it as a useful way to understand the challenges society faced when so many people dealt with what he called fundamental anxiety that came following this period of prolonged violence. He saw it starting with World War I, the Great Depression, the rise of fascism, culminating in World War II. And it's a period of time that has unfortunate resonances with what we are witnessing in our own country today. For Tillich, Courage to Be consisted of two parts. The first was what he referred to as the courage to be in spite of. So courageously choosing to affirm your essential being, your core values, despite tough forces of resistance. And we might think in our times, Martin Luther King Jr. and other civil rights people, like Rosa Parks maybe, as prime examples of that aspect. But the second aspect Tillich described is the courage to be a part of, to partake in something larger than oneself. Because Tillich had a rather biblical, actually, idea of self. It's only a self because it has a world, a structured universe to which it belongs. And if you remember Jesus saying, "What do people say I am?" It's that idea that it is our whole surroundings that tell us who we are. And this courage to be a part could mean participating in a political movement, a religious community, a workers' strike, or any other initiative like a local cleanup that invites people to come together for a common purpose. So today, here we are, to continue our search to come to know and to love wisdom in her creation, and to allow this knowledge and love to find expression in our life choices. We continue the work of caring for all creation, despite the current climate that treats everything and everyone as a commodity. I was reminded too of Robert Kennedy's speech in South Africa. He gave it back in 1966, and the title it got is called A Ripple of Hope, which I will paraphrase just a bit to make it fit us. But each time we stand up for an ideal, act to improve the lot of others, or strike out against injustice, we send forth a tiny ripple of hope. And these ripples cross each other from a million different centers of energy, and they then build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. And another person, too, that came to my attention, one of the directors of Richard Raw's Action and Contemplation program in McLaren, he also speaks of the power of we. When two or three of us gather in the name of truth, honesty, and love, in the name of courage, compassion, and kindness, when we listen to one another with wisdom and wonder, we turn together toward the light and help create islands of sanity in a world that is losing its mind. And indeed, we must fan the flame of hope that has been given to us in our coming together, not just today, but throughout our season together. We can renew our courage because when the command is that we go into some as yet uncharted territory, our collective response, here we are, is joined to Jesus Incarnate Wisdom's promise, I shall be with you. And so I would suggest that we take some time for reflection, prayer, listening toward what might wisdom be leading us as we seek to give shape to our prayer and action. How might we establish an island of sanity in our part of the earth? And at this particular time, what are we willing to risk? And the risk doesn't have to be some towering act of courage. Very few of us are called to them, thank God. But the small acts of conscience that as we gather together shape the soul of our small communities, as well as the soul of our country, and eventually, one hopes, our world. And so I leave you with that